Hello, my fine friends. Welcome back to Destination Discourse. I'm your host, Stuart Butler, joined today with Adam, the funky Homo sapien. How are you, Adam?
I'm good. I'm reacting to the name in real time here, and
Yeah.
I was nervous, but I'm happy with how it all ended. And I want you to know that at 5 a.m. my time here, it's gonna take me a little longer to react to the different things that are going on.
Okay, so number one, your time's off a little bit. We're recording what, 9 Eastern, which puts you in Utah Mountain Time at what, 7 a.m. So I think you're exaggerating a little bit, but I do know you need your beauty sleep, so we apologize for getting you up so early in the morning. But
Yeah,
but we had to do that.
I told you when you asked because of our guest and who our guest is and the opportunity to have him on. I made some serious concessions today for the show.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we have someone very special from the industry with us today, because not only is he with the DMO, but he's also dabbled with elected official status as well. So this is sort of one of those unique anomalies in the industry. But I'm excited today to talk with my good friend Jason Holic. How are you, Jason?
I'm fantastic. I don't think I've ever been called special or anomaly in the same breath, so I appreciate that. And thank you, Adam, for your sacrifice on changing the time to suit some of the scheduling conflicts that popped up on my end.
That's cool.
Absolutely. You know, it's
And
it's I don't know if you've ever seen the episode of The Office where Dwight goes around doing dumb favors for everybody and then says, "You owe me one."
Is that is
But
that what we're at?
yeah, that's where we're at.
that's funny. Now, do you want to clear out because you probably haven't heard of Dell the Funky Homo Sapien? I want to give that band a huge shout out. There's a song that I loved when I was in the it was in the 90s that I really found it. I don't know when it actually came out, but it was called Mr. Dobalina. So for all of you that like old school rap, go listen to Mr. Dobalina by Dell
How's
the
it go?
Funky Homo Sapien. I'm not going to sing. That is your job. That is your role clearly on this show. As you debuted your silky voice last week singing Stu's News jingle.
Yeah, I've
But
already had a couple of producers reach out, and who
yeah.
knows, maybe my career here is limited. I may go into the music industry.
So I heard Tay Tay is looking to do a collab with you pretty soon. So you're pretty up there. I'm
It's no
excited.
surprise.
Yeah. Now, Adam, because it's early in the morning, I'm hoping you have the jingle set up and ready to go, or we're gonna have to hear your dulcet tones again. What are
You
we
know
looking
what?
at?
I'm back on my normal computer today.
Okay.
I'm ready to
And is
go.
the volume set appropriately before we
It
burst
looks like it
eardrums?
Oh
is.
wow.
All
Yell at
right.
me if it's not.
Is that
All
an
right. Well,
AI generated album cover too?
sure
Oh
is.
yeah.
That's
All right,
nice.
here we go.
All right.
I've missed this.
Really though. All right. I'm a dad. Hold it
Oh, I did it. I played it again.
twice again. I literally don't think in 27 episodes you've ever gotten it where you didn't either burst eardrums or play it twice. I think one day we're
We'll get there.
striving for perfection. I can't even say the word. Um, the Stu's News today is about Perplexity that just launched an AI chatbot for colleges, and I want to tie it back to something that happened at the end of last year, where um, when OpenAI launched some tools, educational tools, and classes and courses for folks that maybe need to learn a little more about AI, and they're specifically targeting folks in third world countries, underprivileged communities, and they're really trying to, in OpenAI's case, trying to focus on creating equity around access to AI. Right? They believe it's the great equalizer. We've talked on the show before about how AI raises the floor more than it raises the ceiling, although it does both. It is an equalizer. But Perplexity's move is interesting too because it's the first move, from my perspective, into what we've also talked about, which is AI is going to disrupt education, right? And so Perplexity is going in and partnering with some colleges in terms of creating tools to help their administration, help their planning, help their professors, stuff like that. But it's inevitable that the next step is to revolutionize the actual educational piece itself. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time based on this article pontificating for a couple of minutes about where are we heading here with AI. Like I believe, and I had a conversation recently with a dean of a college about this, that higher education as we know it is going to look very, very, very different in just a few years. So what are your thoughts, Adam? I'm going to throw it to you first.
Yeah, as I read this article, there was two main points that stood out to me. And number one is we've been headed for an educational cliff for quite some time. I mean, the cost of tuition combined with the loans that students are taking out, and then the value of some of that education on the other side has made it difficult more and more every year to get a return on investment when you go through some of these educational programs. And so, for the education space to be embracing disruption like this and allowing an AI tool to accompany a user as they're learning different topics, my hope is that that will also help the cost of education decrease so that we can get back to the point where the value of the education from a financial perspective that students are getting matches up with their ability to pay it back. And I hope that with some of the technological innovations that are coming, that's going to happen, because I've been really nervous about what the future of education looks like, especially in colleges and universities. The second thing is I've heard a lot of people really concerned about this idea that we're creating a bunch of humans who know how to get information very quickly, but also don't know how to do anything themselves, right? And there's been a lot of concern over that. And I really love the idea that as you're learning something, you can have an AI companion that will ask you the critical questions along the way that help you learn the how, not just the what. And if we're able to have education incorporate that every step of the way, some of the shortcuts that are being developed with AI, from not knowing the information to getting the information, the human brain will be able to develop with the answers that they're getting. And I think that's going to be a much more effective form of education as we incorporate AI into it. So really positive. I really liked what I saw in this article, and I'm excited for what it could bring for the future of education.
Great. Jason, what's your take?
I like what you're saying, Adam, about the potential to kind of co-create knowledge with AI, because that's been my hang up with it is, and why I kind of keep my two sons a little bit away from it is I don't want them to just be able to get from it. I think that's has been historically probably the value proposition of higher education is you learn how to create knowledge, especially if you go into advanced degrees. And seeing the potential for AI to sometimes circumvent that process and just create on your behalf by regurgitating and generating something that sounds like knowledge. I like the idea of that companion approach. I'd like to see that be the focus for higher ed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, if we look at the current education system, even going from K through 12 in the United States, it was sort of derived out of the Industrial Revolution, and it was sort of mimicked that same production line methodology. And just the concept that every child has to progress at the same level as everyone in their age group is, especially when some kids are really only like a few days apart in age, but in a year older. Um, I just don't think it serves everyone well. And I think if you think about how we progress folks now, someone could get a C grade, like they could get an 80%. Is that a C or is that a B? I don't know. Or let's say a 70%, 71%, right? That would be a C over here. Is that how it works?
Yeah. Yep.
And so they don't know almost 30%, almost a third of the material, that then they're progressing to the next stage where that's the foundation for them to learn the next. So I think the kids that are getting left behind are the ones that haven't been given. And so AI offers an opportunity at every level of education to not just accelerate, but to curate an experience deliberately for an individual. So it can stress test someone's existing knowledge, focus the education on the individual of where the gaps are, and then it can progress those people faster so that you don't have a 30% gap of knowledge before you progress to the next level. I think it's a great equalizer. Again, I think it's going to help people. I'm not saying people should sit in front of a machine and just talk to a chatbot to learn. I think it's a combination of real teaching, which is a real skill, and curated lesson plans for individuals, right? I think that's probably where we're heading. But
Yeah.
what I like about this article, the fact that some of these universities are actually willing to partner with Anthropic in this case, and say, yeah, we're going to embrace this, is a great signal, because a lot of times when there's established institutions that are under threat, they attack or ignore or deny the new thing that's coming, right? They don't want to disrupt their stranglehold on power. And so the fact that universities have sort of signaled with this that, no, we understand that this is going to disrupt us, and either we can be a part of it or we can get left behind, I think is a really good signal for society overall. So, but I'd
Yeah.
share some of your concerns too, Jason, about we still got to teach people how to create knowledge. We got to teach people how to leverage knowledge, right? You can't just be spoon fed everything. We got to teach them soft skills like critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be increasingly important in the new era that we're facing.
I
Yeah,
really like what
Stuart.
you were saying about kind of individualized lesson plans, because I think that's been um, kind of a growing trend. I don't know if you guys are familiar with IEPs or whatever through school.
Hmm.
There's a lot
Yeah,
of kids that are on IEPs. Well, how do you expect a teacher to have individualized education for 30 kids in their class? And I
right.
think that's
It's not
another great
scalable right
opportunity.
now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, this
Yeah,
scales that. And I think it can address what at least we've seen anecdotally on our side is the kids at the extremes are the ones that tend to get the most attention in the classroom,
yeah,
often for good reason, but then it leaves the kids in the middle, right?
yeah,
And so I think this is really where that could pay off. Get
yeah,
the
Yeah.
attention to everybody, like you're saying, equally.
yeah.
I love that. Jason, I want to hear more about you keeping your sons at arm's length from AI. How old are they, and what does that mean, keeping them at arm's length?
Yeah, they're 7 and 10. So we've got we're pretty regimented on screen time in general, right? Like we've got little aunt my wife has found like this nice analog timer. So they don't even like put the timer on the iPad when they're on it. So they got this timer. They know when their time is up for the day. So we kind of restrict what they're able to do on that. We don't let them play around with random apps. We've got very structured control on that. And even just like we've got Google Home devices around the house. Like
Hmm.
if they have a question, they come to us first. And then we
Hmm.
say, all right, then you can ask Google because I don't know. Or even better, we've got a set of 1984 World Book encyclopedias upstairs. Grab one of those and look it up and have fun with that. So we try, if there's something very specific, like my 10-year-old has been into Dungeons and Dragons. He wants to create a character. Cool. I'll walk with him um, through Dali and like create like this. I don't have the time to paint a Dungeons and Dragon character, but like we can talk about with OpenAI what we want this character to look like, and then boom, we've got it. So very specific use cases that kind of showcase that power, but we require them to have some kind of creativity in the process also, not just kind of dumping it out there. Let's engineer that prompt to get exactly what you want.
It's smart. It's a real
Interesting.
thoughtful approach to parenting. I think, hats off to you. There's, on the cusp of being an empty nester where, I don't feel like your work's ever done as a parent, but certainly the kids are closer to the finished product with my kids at 19 and 16.
Yeah.
I'm definitely looking back now and kind of wishing there was a few things, especially with technology, that I did a little different. Now, they're both great kids and well-rounded, and we've given them the foundations for success, but there's still a dependency and an over-reliance on technology that I
Yeah.
don't love. And so we talk about it still with our kids, so.
My wife was a teacher, so a lot of credit to her because she saw this
I mean,
early
we
on
just
in other
assumed it
kids.
was all her. I mean,
Yeah, of
we
course.
know you,
Yeah,
Jason.
it's
It's
always
clearly
yeah.
isn't you.
Yeah. I
This,
just kind
yeah.
of follow along with it. But yeah, she saw firsthand early on like this technology in the classroom and what the impacts were good and negative. So she's kind of structured that in the house, and I just make sure that we've got the rules set on the technology because that's, you know, my strong suit.
Yeah,
Right.
it's interesting because the reason I asked the question is I think there's a lot of different angles you can go at it from as a parent, right? And one is just keep it separated from them. But my fear in that is that that also could put them at a severe disadvantage
Yeah.
compared to the rest of the market when they graduate. And so last night I actually walked into the office and my daughter was doing a school assignment. They were doing slam poetry. It was a kind of a fun activity for them to be doing for their homework. And I walk in and the prompt she has entered into ChatGPT says, "Give me a 20-line slam poem." And I'm like, "Wait a second. Hold on here. I'm fine with you using this, but I want to see an awesome prompt if you're going to be using ChatGPT for this. So I want it to be yours. What's the topic? What are some of the things that you want it to describe? And went through several things, and she updated her prompt. But your exact fear is that, right? Is that they're just going to say, do this simple generic thing for me
Right.
that everyone's going to know is AI, as opposed to if you give a really well engineered prompt, it's going to be your product, your project, and AI just helped you shape it, you know.
Right. It becomes the
So it's
tool.
going to be,
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be interesting as a parent to understand how to navigate that as time goes on, because it will be cheating if you just say, "Give me the answer."
Right.
So I have an anecdote that illustrates this. So I have a good friend of mine. She's on a selection committee for scholars for a certain type of scholarship for our local university, and so every year, it's aimed at women, and so every year the applicants have to write an essay, and the prompt is something like talk about a female figure that has inspired you in life, right, and something like that. And she said about a year ago, it used to be very diverse in what people were saying, but about a year ago, 80% of the responses were picking the same woman. And I forget who it was. It was like Amelia Earhart or someone like that. But it was like 80% all of a sudden were picking the same woman. And she's like, what in the world is going on? So she went to ChatGPT and just typed in the generic prompt that was given to the students. And ChatGPT was manifesting like two specific people. And she was like, well, 80% were picking the first one. And out of the other 20%, at least half of them were picking the second one. So only 10% of people were actually thinking of the person themselves or doing a little research. And so that's
Doesn't
the
that make
danger.
it doesn't that make it easy to choose who
Oh
to
yeah,
accept?
100%. They were all
Right.
gone, right? All of them are gone. But I think that's the danger is we become idiocracy, right? We can't think. There's no critical thinking. There's no discernment. There's no ability to filter, and so it's scary. So our job, especially as folks that have grown up without this technology that are now adopting it, is to make sure that the skill set required still exists in the next generation that are growing up exclusively with this technology. So hats off to you, Jason. I think what you're doing is commendable, and a little bit to you too, Adam. Coaching your parent, coaching your kid is smart. So
I
even
do
though
have
you
a
have
fun
they
little. Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I would say even
Oh,
though you give them unfettered access to technology, I think you're still coaching them. So that's good.
yeah, I would say unfettered access is probably a bit of an exaggeration, like my start time comment this
Yeah.
morning. But I did, just for fun, took her assignment and wrote a slam poem using ChatGPT, using the destination marketing agent,
Yeah.
and
Are you
developed a
going to debut
slam.
it here on this show?
Well, we can maybe, if we have time at the end. I don't want to take too much time because 20 lines actually is a lot to read.
Yeah.
But it's owned media slamming paid media, and it's the destination marketing agent's
Oh, wow.
rendition of that. So
Oh, are you going to send it to Katie Briscoe and see if she slams you back?
absolutely, I actually feel like if I had been armed with that poem, it just would have been a slam dunk in that debate that we had. But
It sounds delightfully nerdy. Maybe that should be like a session at DI is just slam poetry for
That's pretty good.
destination marketing.
That's a really good
ooh,
idea.
Yeah.
Oh, you
yeah,
may
that'd be
have to
fun.
debut it at an upcoming conference. That's great. All right, so Jason, look, we've been rude. We talked about our topics. I want us to talk about your topic. So every time that we bring a new guest on, we ask them what's the thing they really want to talk about. What's grinding their gears? What's getting their goat? What's the thing in the industry that they really have a strong opinion about? So
Yeah.
you want to tell the audience what it is that you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so I mean it's not necessarily a new conversation, but I think it's gaining traction and every destination is kind of approaching it through their own lens. So anyone who's been in the space for a while has probably been familiar with the shift from like CVBs to DMOs to DMMOs to DOs, and now there's a lot of talk about stewardship. And I think for us, it's been a long journey as well. And I think, and it's worked out well for us, right? I think we've always said, all right, we need to have a seat at the table, but we've taken kind of a long view approach, and we've not been overly ambitious in our vision and mission on how we get to that point. But we still call ourselves a DMO. We're still a destination marketing organization. And our contract with Osceola County is to promote visitation and bring in that economic impact for the community. But to do that responsibly and to ensure that it sustains our local communities is equally important. So there's always been this what we do as DMOs, but I think there's new attention to how we do it. And so we've taken the destination stewardship approach. We've always talked about management, destination management, and what's our role in that. And I think some destinations have kind of shied away from it because you've got chambers, you've got economic development agencies, you have all these other entities in the destination. And that word management, I think, can create some conflict potentially between those. And that's not what we want to do, is we want to enlarge the table and make sure that all points of view are taken into account so that everybody's got ownership in the end result. Everybody has ownership and a stake in the equity built by tourism promotion. So that's kind of where we're at, is that shift into stewardship, but not at the expense of marketing and promotion.
And so for you in Kissimmee, are you the DMO and there's a separate chamber? Is that right?
Yeah, so it's we're the DMO. We're a 501c6 contracted directly with Osceola County, and there's actually several chambers around the
Okay.
destination. So there's the Osceola Chamber, which used to be the Kissimmee Chamber, and then there's the St. Cloud Chamber, which is in St. Cloud, which is one of the two cities in the county. So there's Kissimmee, St. Cloud, and then there's also the Hispanic Chamber that has a big footprint here. So there's all these different entities. Yeah.
And what about economic development? Who's responsible for that in your county?
So that's also kind of split up between the two cities, have their own economic development leads. The county has one, and then we also have a regional economic. It's called the Orlando Economic Partnership, and they take more of a regional approach. So there's lots of entities working together.
And then do you have any kind of placemaking organizations in addition to that, like a downtown group or any
We've
kind
got
of?
some like Main Streets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got the both cities have their Main Street organizations, I think. I know Kissimmee has one. And then
And are
there's
they private or public-private or public funded? You know,
that's a
for the Main
great
Street?
question. I think
Combination
they're
probably.
also public-private
Okay.
in the state. Yeah.
Yeah. So how much alignment do you have between all those organizations? Like how often is the DMO talking to those? Are they talking to each other?
So different relationships with each. So we have we contractually support both chambers. That's actually written in our contract with the county, is that we'll help support the chambers financially. But then we also have team members that sit on boards or committees or councils or coalitions on those chambers that we kind of strategically pick that will align with what our strengths are and what we can bring to the table. So there's like the Tourism Safety Coalition, for example, through the Osceola Chamber. We sit and participate on that because it directly impacts us. And then we can also bring things to the table that can benefit those businesses. So we've got seats at the table for some of those. And then for others, like the Main Streets, they put on events, and they are typically recipients of our Tourism Enhancements Grants program, which can supplement their marketing budget to promote their events and bring in visitors. So it's kind of different relationships depending on which entity we're talking about.
Got it. And then do you guys work on collective visioning or even like anything from legislative priorities to, you know, the 10-year master plan for the destination? Is that how much collaboration is there on that stuff?
So that's we don't have one of those grand 10-year master plans.
Yeah.
That's something that we want to address. Is that something that we need to do? And obviously the county has their future land use planning and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of those things are taken care of kind of at the government level, but as we've had more seats at others' tables, we've realized and recognized the need for something focused on stewardship itself, and ensuring that we are not exploiting the destination, not exploiting residents, but rather ensuring that economic impact and opportunity is spread throughout. Not at the expense of our natural resources, which we're very blessed to have here in Osceola County, that balance between
Mhm.
man-made and natural.
Yeah. So when we talk about stewardship, I think it's a word that means a little different for different stakeholders and different
Yeah.
people, right? Like some people immediately gravitate towards environmental considerations, right? Sustainability and things like that. Um, Others are looking more at the economic sustainability. Some
Yep.
is a combination. In our office, whenever people say stewardship, they pretend that they're saying Stuart, SHIT, and they
Oh,
talk
it's low
about the
hanging
crazy
fruit.
stuff we're doing, right? Are we doing more
That's good.
Stuart? Yeah, so that gets used. But in your organization, in personally to you, Jason, like, how do you put a border around what stewardship is?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In Florida, Florida has actually been a pretty strong leader when it comes to environmental sustainability. Like
Hmm.
if you're a politician in Florida, you've got to say something about Everglades protection or coastal
Yeah,
protection or
yeah.
preventing reds. Like there's always something environmental that's got to be on your agenda to be successful. So the term sustainability, although globally encompasses the triple bottom line of people, planet, and profits, here in Florida, it has been so well established and entrenched as purely that environmental aspect
Hmm.
that we knew we as one destination could not reframe that conversation. So that's why we gravitated towards the term stewardship, because it it hasn't had in our state that flag staked on it and what the definition is. And so we could help craft what that definition means for the destination. And so
Yeah.
that allows us to encompass all aspects of sustainability, including preserving and protecting our local history, heritage, and our um, cultures and communities,
Hmm.
ensuring environmental protection through what we do, and then obviously focusing on the monetary bottom line, ensuring that there's an economic viability to what we do. So that's the way that we're approaching it, and it seems
Hmm.
that it's kind of gaining traction here locally, and it also really aligns with like what Destinations International has come up with as a destination, that net positive impact.
Right.
Minimize the negative impact, especially environmental, to a destination, and maximize that positive impact and spread it as equitably as possible.
Yeah. So as freely as you can talk about this, obviously this is a public forum, but we try to, keep it real here to some degree. Where are the friction points in you trying to accomplish those goals and trying to maybe from some perspectives expand the role of the DMO into areas that aren't traditionally viewed as a DMO role? Have you
Yeah.
gotten pushback from either internal or external stakeholders on that?
And we've had some pretty good discussions in our strategic planning session. So we're in the middle of our next 3-year strategic plan as an organization. And that's where we're kind of formally adopting this stewardship approach for the next 3 years. I can't talk into too much detail because we're still in the
No.
planning process, but it will have a pretty sizable amount of attention on it. Points of friction, because we have a very diverse board in terms of industry makeup, resident location, in addition to kind of demographics. Those discussions are very fruitful and productive. We've got a
Hmm.
really good board when we throw out these topics and ideas. We get that feedback, and most importantly, we listen and then share with them what we've heard, and that helps shape the future of it. So any of the friction that we experience is more of a productive conversation.
Right.
And I mentioned earlier that we've taken kind of a slower, measured approach to this. If we had, 10 years ago come out and said, "Hey, we're gonna plant 100,000 trees because why not?"
Hmm.
That would have been a point of friction. But
Right.
because we're collaborating on this with members of the industry, and we've got, members of economic development on our board, members of county government, we're able to have these conversations and say, all right, here is the vision of where we're going. And so it's less of a surprise along the way when we start planting trees or we start bringing in office compost, whatever. Um, they know that it's part of that vision. So I think by having those conversations with the stakeholders early on and knowing that this is a long, hard slog to kind of get to where you want to go. And maybe slog's not the right word because it's a marathon, right? It's productive. You're building up your cardio. Uh,
Hmm.
having that patience is really that patience in those conversations, and then the flexibility to change, I think helps prevent a lot of that friction, or at least
Are you
make
getting
friction
are you
productive.
getting any pushback from elected officials in terms of use of funding or appropriate restrictions of the funding?
No, because again, that slow and measured approach, we only have been working on things for the most part that are acceptable uses of the tourist development tax in Florida. What we're doing is leveraging sustainability and stewardship as a way to promote the destination. So when I talk about planting 100,000 trees, we've done that. We planted 103,000 trees around the globe. The vast majority of those are part of our meetings incentive program. So a lot of destinations have meetings incentives where they give cash back to the meeting planner.
Oh, wow.
That
That's
really
smart.
grew in popularity, um, more widespread after the pandemic as destinations are trying to, bring back that business travel. So to sweeten the pot on our side, we said, all right, we'll plant a tree with every room night generated also with our partnership with Trees for Travel. And so in the last 2 years, we've planted 103,000 trees. And because that's part of the incentive package, that's a marketing and sales tactic, but it's also global stewardship.
Yeah.
So things like that, we look at acceptable use of the money, and as long as we're following the letter of the law, we're fine, we're good. And the way
smart.
we frame up a lot of these initiatives is that blending of stewardship with kind of the more traditional brand awareness or driving visitation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
I got a couple more questions, but Adam, I'm hogging them all right now. So I'll let you jump in here for a few. And
Well,
then,
I'm going to give you my reaction, and I want you to know that first of all, everything that you just described that should be done by a DMO, I agree with you in principle. I agree with you in a vacuum. And I'll say that I have sat in on far too many destination board meetings and presentations to the board where we present the annual marketing plan, and you've got the guy in the corner that raises his hand and said, "Can't we just buy an ad in the phone book?" Which I that's obviously aggressive, but this was a guy like 10 years ago when I was in a board meeting. But this is the level of issue that I think a lot of, especially smaller DMOs run into. And I feel like what you're describing in this migration to stewardship and especially global stewardship, I feel like it's a rich man's game.
hmm,
And the reason I say that is the number one, well, I would say the top two complaints that I hear from smaller DMOs: budget and bandwidth. And when these smaller DMOs run into budget and bandwidth issues, they are held accountable specifically to the volume of revenue generated by the rooms that are booked in the destination in that month or in that quarter or in that year. And so as I hear what you're saying, my number one concern is until communities holistically accept that stewardship is the responsibility of the DMO, and this goes for small and large communities, that is a little bit of a losing battle because of budget and bandwidth. You're to end up with a large segment of destination marketing organizations still needing to have marketing be the main focus because that's how the community kind of demands for them to
right.
perform and evaluates the quality of what they're doing. So I love it in principle, and I think there is a tier of destination that will be able to do this very effectively, get their community on board, assign two or three people to stewardship as a function within the destination. But I don't see, I see there being a very clear division between the destinations that are capable of doing this and the destinations that are just financially incapable
Right.
of doing this. And so that's my immediate reaction is I don't want to tell a bunch of small DMOs, you need to migrate to stewardship, and when in reality that could cost them their job or cost them their
Right.
funding or whatever it is.
No, I don't disagree with you. And that's, I think, why I brought up earlier is every destination is going to look at this differently. Like, right, for us, meetings, groups, huge deal. So how do we sweeten the pot and make it take on some of that stewardship aspect? For smaller DMOs, especially rural, planting 100,000 trees isn't feasible, nor is it going to really provide much benefit. But if you're smaller and rural, then is that the opportunity to kind of like look at spreading the visitor dollar to those U-pick farms, the agritourism, right, those types of things. So I think there are different ways that DMOs can approach this, and those are things that even we're trying to figure out. Is we've got agritourism, and how do we take the visitors that come here for the theme parks that we're known for, and go visit those things that are what people would sometimes call like real Florida, right? Like out in like the scrublands or the swamps, and get them to experience the other side, which is what we need to do to spread those visitor dollars. So I think that again, that's why we look at it, that triple bottom line for us, planet, we can really help on the planet side of things because we're fortunate with our resources and the stakeholder group that we have rallying behind that cause. Some others might just have to focus on the people, right? Like, how do we really make sure that tourism works for the people? And if you do that right and you state your case, then those stakeholders that might otherwise bristle at that thought, well, now they've got constituents that are saying, hey, tourism's working for me. And maybe that'll kind of like soften the bristles. And again, it's a long, slow process.
Yeah. So I kind of disagree with both of you a little bit, but agree with both of you at the same time. So I think, yeah, I was very critical early on when I joined the DMO space of the movement to DMMO. I thought it was a strategic mistake, and I thought it was going to end up potentially being the death of DMOs because we were getting into areas with placemaking and product development that were already defined responsibilities of a municipality or economic development that were separate from us. And they were distinct organizations. And I felt like if we get it too far ahead of our skis, there's going to be some blowback that could be very detrimental to our role. But I think as I've matured as a CMO and learned the industry and gotten a little more nuanced in my thinking, and we've talked about it ad nauseum on this site, that on this show, that our role ultimately is improving the quality of life for the community we're in, right? And so I still don't love the word stewardship. I don't know that it's perfect. I think it's the best that we've gotten so far, but I think there's probably a better word that will come. But I think we've got to open our aperture. Like, we've talked a lot on this show about how if we're just a marketing agency, we're going to fail. Right, we're going to fail because at some point a marketing agency is replaceable, as we saw with Duluth and other places. And so we've got to provide value, tangible value throughout the community beyond just advertising. And I don't necessarily agree with you, Adam, that not all DMOs can do this, because it's not necessarily, hey, you need a person dedicated to stewardship. I don't think that's the approach. I think the approach is widening your aperture to say, what is our purview and what should we consider when we're making decisions? And certainly the environment we live in, is a consideration for us, because long term, if we are to take all of the resources out of our community, we don't have a place for people to visit. So it's implied, and it's obvious that we have to protect that. So how we do that, it doesn't mean we have to physically do all the work. It could be with a convener or with a leader, or we set the table for other people to come and sit at. So I think where I've gotten more nuanced is, we don't have to do everything and own everything and be the driving force behind everything. But what we do need, and Brad said this when he was on this show a few weeks ago, is we've got to be at the table. Every one of the tables that touches where our purview is, we've got to be at the table. But we've got to do it in a balanced way where we're not alienating people, where we're not creating divisions between organizations and power structures within our community. And we got to do it by listening to the community, both the residents and the elected officials in our business community. We got to listen to them about what is it they see us being able to contribute to. And I think what we've learned, certainly over the last 2 years here in Myrtle Beach, is the more we're helpful to people, we don't go in and tell people how to do it, but we listen and say, where are your pain points? Where are the places we can help eliminate those, reduce friction? We've been embraced with open arms. Like, our relationship with our city, our relationship with economic development, our relationship with other chambers in our jurisdiction have improved exponentially, because we're not going there like saying we're the savior or we're going to do it all. We're just going there and saying we're a partner or a collaborator. How can we help? And I think that, again, I don't know that stewardship's the right word, but there's not a DMO, whether you're one person or 10 people or 100 people, that couldn't have a more community-oriented spirit towards collaboration, towards, trying to improve the quality of life for the community, both the residents and the businesses.
Yeah.
So that's where I sort of agree and sort of disagree with both of you.
Well, I think, Stuart, you brought up a good point. Like, none of this is possible without that solid foundation of stakeholder relations, right? Like, if we hadn't spent our first 10 years as a DMO, if we hadn't spent that building those relationships, then we could not do what we're doing.
Right.
Because we wouldn't know what our stakeholders were interested in. And we're fortunate, again, we've got several of our county commissioners that are very much focused on environmental causes. So when they heard that we're working on planting trees globally, like, cool, let's do something here. So last Friday, we worked with the county and planted 200 trees at Pioneer Village, which is a shared space between visitors and residents. So again, like it's that's the foundational work, is that stakeholder relations. And for some people, that might be the extent of stewardship, because that's just what your resources are capped at. But that is the root of it, right? If you're not listening to your stakeholders and helping to reduce the friction points that you're talking about, I mean, that is really that's a form of stewardship, really.
Yeah. Yeah. If you had a magic wand and you could wave it and change something in your area in terms of how the organizations were structured, it could be, hey, bringing people under one umbrella. It could be merging organization. It could be anything. Like what would you do that could be most impactful? And if you don't feel comfortable talking about it specifically in yours, like maybe hypothetically say, how should those organizations that are all touching the same sort of area, what would be an ideal structure in Jason Holic's mind?
Between the organizations?
Yeah, and just how does a community go about creating, because at some point there wasn't, chambers of commerce didn't exist, right? The business community saw a need for an advocate that could have a collective voice, right? At some point, DMOs didn't exist until someone said, hey, if we pool our money together and we can maybe get some tax dollars too, we can attract more people to our destination. And then at some point someone said, well, we need to bring more business here, so let's create economic development and placemaking, and all these things have sort of plugged in holes, but they've done it individually. So if we were to step back now and know all the things we know as a destination, like to me it seems, and I'll lead the witness a little bit, but to me it seems like having everything as a disparate entity isn't the most efficient way to do it, and it wouldn't be how we would design it today. And I look at places like, and this is I've been looking a little bit, we've got a new CEO coming in. Matt Pavanik is going to be starting here. That's been publicly announced here in the next few weeks, and he comes from Topeka, and so their structure is very interesting because they have the Greater Topeka Partnership, I think it's called, but it's an umbrella organization, and under which sits a DMO, a chamber, a downtown group, and economic development. They're all one entity, but with separate mandates, separate boards, separate. So it's like, that's an interesting structure that I hadn't seen in many other places. But obviously, there's some trade-offs. There's some massive advantages to that, but potentially some downside. But I don't know if you've ever given that thought about, what would it look like if we would just wave a magic wand and change how things get done?
It's a good question. It sounds similar to isn't Houston set up kind of like that too?
It might be, yeah.
Yeah. I kind of like the decentralized approach that we have. It's got friction points and all that, but I think friction is the root of innovation also, the root of invention. Like, if you don't have friction, then things are running smooth, but then at what cost? If there's no friction, then you're not forced to think of ways to collaborate. So I don't think the answer, at least for us, and again, every destination is going to be different. We've got, like I said, 2 cities, a big county that spreads from urban to some of the most rural lands you'll still find in Florida. And I think having one organization overseeing all that might lose some of the vision into some of those differing areas and the differing viewpoints. So it's good for us currently to have those different organizations that can really take into account their community's needs and feedback and thoughts. But I do think there's opportunity for even more collaboration. And that's kind of what we're focusing on, is we still need to make sure we're at those seats at the table. And then do we need another table that allows the organizations that are important to our vision to come together and collaborate. Because right now we're
Yeah.
doing a lot of going out and spreading the word, but is there another opportunity now to kind of reciprocate, right?
Yeah. So what's in Jason Holic's secret playbook of building those relationships and those collaborative partnerships? Have you learned anything over you've been there quite a while, but are there certain things and approaches that you found more effective than others?
Yeah, I think what you already stated, like going in saying, how can we help,
Yeah.
is the key. I don't think anyone, like you mentioned, wants somebody to come in and act like they have all the answers
Mhm.
or kind of pushes them in a different direction. Because every organization, every community has their own agenda. And if we come in and we don't respect that, then we're not going to get anywhere. So I think that's it. Like coming in, offering to help in any way you can. And if it's outside your purview or your ability, we as DMOs also have unique connections through the community.
Yeah.
So you don't just stop at no, you stop at I'm not able to do that, but I think I know someone who can. So never letting those conversations kind of die on the vine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an important and often overlooked role of a DMO because we do have those tentacles throughout the community in many facets that don't typically always connect, right? So one of our roles should be that not just a convener, but a connector and then getting out of the way, right? Sometimes we want to stay at the table with that connection. Sometimes we do the Irish exit, but I think that's great. That's one of ours. We're getting a little low on time. Adam, do you have any other things you want to be rude about and disagree with our guest?
No, I actually, I think both of you have made some really interesting points, and I want to go back to this idea of stewardship. There is no argument like we all need to take care of the destination that we're managing, right? I think you talked about the magic wand, Stuart. If we could wave a magic wand, what would it look like? Well, if you think about what a lot of larger DMOs and I would say small DMOs that have done a good job of building their brand and generating visitation are dealing with, over tourism is one of these words that comes around a lot. And usually, as soon as you start to hear over tourism, that's when stewardship becomes a real priority. And it almost makes me wonder because on the other end of the spectrum, you've got small destinations who don't even have enough restaurants because they're not getting the volume of visitations that they need. And it's like, man, what if stewardship we looked at it in a different way where we identify visitors that to us we would consider, when I say us, just in destinations that have achieved the point where over tourism might be an issue. What if we could identify our lower value traveler, maybe the people that only stay a night or two or only spend this much money or whatever, and we identify what that traveler looks like, and we build some sort of a funneling system to get them to these destinations who would be thrilled to have that low value visitor come to their destination for a night or two and spend a little bit of money. And it's like, man, what if we could build this ecosystem that allows us to distribute the visitors according to what both the visitor and the destination needs so that everybody can achieve their goals together. And that way you're not going to, if you've got a small destination who has those types of issues and struggling with getting the volume of visitation they need, when they use the word stewardship, they're not going to irritate half the board and put their job in jeopardy. And we've got the right destinations focused on the right priorities. I don't know. Again, that's magic wand scenario,
Yeah.
right? But I could see something like that being really, really valuable to all destinations involved.
Yeah.
So you just invented Tinder for DMOs, is what you just did. Like with matching the destination with the audience.
TM. Yeah, TM.
Yeah, that could be fun. Well, yeah, and Adam, you brought up another good point is like sometimes even the word stewardship people bristle at. So I guess really my magic wand would be just like let's stop worrying about the words we're using. That would be awesome if we could
Focus
just
on the
not have to
principle.
worry about it. Yeah, like
Yeah,
we're
the
all
intent.
really
Yeah.
we all want the same thing. So let's not let the word choice stop us from working together.
Or we could just invent a new word, which
Right.
marketers love to do. Maybe
Yeah,
it's a
stewardship.
portmanteau of two different
Yes.
words. Yeah, it's stewardship, maybe so. Well, Jason, this has been really cool. It's enlightening. I like it when these shows sort of leave me thinking differently, and you certainly did that today. So if you have any final thoughts, now would be the time to share them with the audience, with our
I mean, I think
destination is what we're now calling them.
Yeah, I think you milked all the thoughts out of me. This is a great conversation. Thanks for having me on here.
We're glad to have you. Welcome back anytime. Absolutely. Thank you. You're now one of our desties, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. If people want to find you, where can they do that, Jason?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on email. I've got, I don't know, here. Here's my business card. I'll just put it up to the screen. You guys can see.
Oh, you nailed it.
Oh,
The first
not
time
focusing.
here.
All right.
That is
Uh,
innovation right
Yeah,
there.
that's not going to work. But Jay Holic at experiencekissimmee.com. Good luck spelling my name and Kissimmee correctly. Holic, Holse, and Kissimmee, Kiss, Immee.
There you go.
It is.
Couldn't be simpler.
Yeah.
You need to, you know how, I don't know if you did this in America, but in England when we were learning to spell Mississippi, it was always like you sort of, it was like a poem almost. You're like
Yeah.
MISSISSIPPI. It was like you need that with Kissimmee. So
With an AI jingle.
yeah, there you go. Next time you're on the show, we expect
Yeah.
a Kissimmee AI jingle. That'd be great. Adam, where can they find you?
Yeah, and I hope people understand better how to find Jason after what we just went through than they did before he said it. I love like people trying to focus on the business card and then how to spell Kissimmee.
Yeah.
So you can find me on LinkedIn or Adam at thebrandrevolt.com. And of course, you can find me on Tourism IQ.
And we'll have to look forward to your death slam or your slam poetry next time that we have an episode, right? Or maybe at an upcoming conference. Who knows? Foreshadowing.
Who knows? We'll make sure it's at the right time.
All right. If you want to get a hold of me, then my email is stuart.butler@visitmyrtlebeach.com, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn. And please leave a review. We're going to read them out on the show. You know, Adam's mom left a really nice review a couple of weeks ago, but we'd love to have more folks leave reviews that Adam is going to be forced to read. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more. And until next time, this has been Destination Discourse.
Thanks, everybody.